Hello, everyone. It's been a while since I've done a video, but I wanted to share some techniques with you using watercolor paper and spritzers in particular. I did a class in person at last weekend where we made 4 cards, and I'm going to show you 3 of them in this video. Just walking you through, like I said, some ways to use your watercolor paper and your spritzer. So key things you would need for this is our Fluid 100 watercolor paper. You can actually make these cards with one sheet. And if you would like the dimensions and more details, place any order of $25 or more using this host code in the next 2 weeks, and I will send you a handmade thank you card, like I do for every order I get because I appreciate them so much. But I'll also include a sheet of our what do we call it? Fluid 100 watercolor paper, so that you would have a piece to use. And then I would also send you via email the measurements for these cards. Like I said, I just used one piece and cut it down and then was able to make these 3 cards I'm going to show you. So we're going to do this one with this wash on it. I'm going to show you how to do this design. So again, doing some spritzing and having our the stamp will kind of fade and look like it was watercolor. And then this one, which we're actually going to add our spritz and do our water on our stamp. So 3 different ideas and ways to do it. As I go through, I'll also point out the stamp sets I used and some of the other materials I used on these. But again, just wanted to kind of walk you through and give you some ideas of ways you can use this. So here's the host code again. You also can visit my website, emkcreations.com. I shared some of these projects in a blog post I did the other day with a complete list of materials. And so I will do another blog post here too that I'll share the video in and make sure you have all of the information you need. So here we go. I am not going to complete the whole card. I'm just going to walk you through the different techniques and then talk to you about how I put it together. So for this first one, most of these you're going to need to plan to let it dry for a little while afterwards before you do any other stamping. So I'm going to kind of do this in shifts so I can show you the different things I did. This one does use 3 different colors of ink refills. So I was using some of our retiring in colors. I used Parakeet Party, Sweet Sorbet, and Orchid Oasis. And I actually, this piece right here, this little mat, I'll pull it down a little bit further so I can show you, is what came with the glass mat that you were able to get if you joined recently. I had taken advantage of being able to order one, and I absolutely love it. And one of the things I like is this piece here that you can use for these types of projects. So I am just going to put a dot of each of these on here. You'll see I haven't even cleaned them since last time it dried, but it'll loosen back up or reactivate, if you will, once I add some water to it. So just 1 drop. And then I am going to, so I'm using a spritzer and the water painters on this project. And I'm going to go ahead and try to do my spritzing up here on this paper towel so I hopefully don't get everything messy. But I am going to get it pretty wet. I want lots of liquid on there. And then I want to make sure that I get my brush. Oh, I got it nice and wet. So let's see what it does. Because I want to get that ink on there. And then when you go, that's how it's going to spread, is if things are nice and wet on there. And there is no right or wrong way to do this when you're working with watercolors. You just have to play around with it. That's what I told my customers the other day in class, that every time you do it, it's going to look different. So just have fun with it and don't get too worried about it looking any type of particular way or perfect, if you will. Let's see if I can get some water to come out of this one. I think hopefully it's pretty. No, I'm going to need some more water. We're going to try spritzing. And you always can add more after the fact too. I'm going to pick up some of that and put it in here. There we go. So that's getting it to spread some more. The more water you use, the more it'll spread. The less you use, the darker your color. You can go back in and add some color and picking up extra there and adding it. And like I said, it's going to look different every single time you do it. So don't stress too much about what you think might be perfection. You just want to have fun with it. Now we're going to add the orchid. And then, like I said, you're going to end up wanting to set it aside. Oh, there we go. Added quite a bit. The other thing you can do is take a paper towel or a Kleenex and then blot it. And that will help it to dry a little bit faster. That got some of our excess up. Now you'll notice, like I said, every time you do it, it's different. I have much darker colors on the first one I did, and this one's lighter. So you'll just need to play around with it. You can add more if you don't think it's dark enough. Like I can go back, and again, this has already started to dry. So if I start to add more color, it's going to get real dark and it's not going to smear as much. So you definitely want to experiment and see how you like it. So as I mentioned, we're going to set this aside because we want it to dry more. You could use a heat tool on it, but you definitely want it to dry more before you add your ink. I did use Memento Black. And this whole card I built around the Retiring Super Cool stamp set. I really like this one, and it's on sale. But I just think the images are so cute, and then you can build these words. So I had put together the "You Are So Sweet" and then stamped it on there in Memento Black ink. The paper around it as well is from the Zany Zoo. It's one of the back sides. So I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to show you the next one. So this one too, we need to allow some time to dry in between. So I'm going to do it next. But I am going to, once again, spritz my piece of paper. And really, I'm focusing more on the bottom for this one. And if I am not careful, I'm going to end up getting those on there and adding color that I don't mean to add. Okay, so I got it nice and wet towards the bottom. I used two colors for this. I used Bubble Bath and Gorgeous Grape. And I did the Bubble Bath first. So I stamped it on there. And because it's nice and wet, it is going to smear a lot. You can see there you have some of the outline, and here you really have none of it. And that's okay. So if you want your image to be darker and not run as much, you need to let it dry more. If you want it to run a lot like it did here, you could go ahead and stamp now, which we'll go ahead and try it. Because like I said, every time you do it, it'll be different. You want to experiment. You want to see what you like, which way looks the best to you. So you can see it's already starting to dry in some spots. So there you go. Now, the other option you have is to spritz it again. So depending on how much you want that to spread and fade, if you will, depending on what look you're going for, you can spritz it. So we'll just go ahead, like I said, there's no right or wrong. We will experiment. So I added a little bit more, a little bit higher up, and it's more dry up there because remember I had only really spritzed towards the bottom. So if we take it, you're going to see how it can, I'm trying not to spray too much, but there you go. Do you see how it started to go ahead and blend it, spread it? I don't know what word we want to use for that. But then again, you can tap it off. So we have some parts where you can still make out what the stamp was, and some parts where it really did have it spread and look more watercolor. So this is how I finished it. So the other thing I was going to show you is, if you've never done this, you can add those dots. If you see people who have stuff flicked on there, if you will, the way I do it is I use an old marker, because if you keep doing this, you will likely, at least I have, damaged the tips of them. So I just use old ones, but you just take it and flick it against the lid. Do you see how it's adding? So again, it was already a blend, or you can use a regular marker too, that I was going to need to replace. So here's a way to continue to use it and get more life out of it when the tip is damaged or dull. And so if you can see that, I added those little flecks. So the other things I did on this card, this is just a piece of the Bubble Bath that I ran through the embossing folder. I think this one's called Layered Brick, maybe. I've got it here somewhere. So I ran it through using the embossing folder. And then I actually adhered it to a piece of white cardstock. So it is not pink all the way through because I wanted, sometimes when you do that, if you would use just your piece of cardstock for your base and run it through the embossing folder, you can, but you will have the design on the inside of your card as well. And I didn't want that. So I did it this way. I also really like these dies. My other tip here is make sure you use adhesive sheets, because if you'll run it through with an adhesive sheet, when you're doing the actual word, not the outline, you can kind of see. So I put adhesive sheet on the back of my bubble bath. And then when you run this die through, then when you peel it off, it's a sticker. And so it goes on here so easily. You're not having to mess with liquid glue. And I don't know about you, but I get my fingers sticky every single time I try to use it. And then I did just tie my twine around this piece right here before I adhered it down. So that kind of walks you through that card. And then our last one. This one, I actually added or did my spritzing to my stamp. So I'm going to show you how I did it. And I added 2 colors. So I started, and I did not spritz my paper first. So you're going to see, again, it does do some of the fading, smearing, whatever you want to call running in spots depending on how wet I get the stamp. If you really want it to blend, you could go ahead and spritz your paper first, or you'll see after we stamp, you can also go back and spritz it and have it do that. But for this one, I did Flirty Flamingo first. And then I actually used Berry Burst and a sponge dauber. And I added color around the edge. So that's how I got the two-tone, is by adding just around the edge. And then I took it, let me get these out of the way. And I spritzed it. And again, you want to be gentle with your spritzing. Well, maybe I wasn't so gentle. You'll notice that there's a lot there in the middle. So it's going to be probably, yep, I did a lot of it. And then I just stamped 3 times with the same stamp, same inking. I didn't redo it. But again, I can go back with my paper towel and soak up that excess. So as I mentioned before, you're going to get a very different look every single time you do this. This one, again, came out a little bit darker, so I obviously didn't put quite as much on there. And I spritzed it more than I did on this one. So it's going to look different every time. And if you want, you could spritz it again now and have it blur even more around those edges, because really you're seeing a lot more of it in the middle than you are on the edges. So for this one, I used the zinnias. The Simply Zinnia set, and I use the paper that goes with it. So here I actually stamped directly on my designer series paper. I love this. This is one of our online exclusives. So if you've missed it, it's not in any catalog, but it's online. You can still, I know the whole online exclusive tends to confuse people sometimes. It doesn't mean that you can't order it from me if you're here for a class or you're sending me your order. It doesn't have to be ordered online directly. It just means that it will only be featured online. It's not in a printed publication. But it is absolutely gorgeous. The paper that goes with it is amazing. So definitely check that one out. It is the only one I used that was not retiring. A lot of the rest of what I used was retiring. I also think that I failed to tell you. So for this card, the stamp set I used was the botanical layers. And I used this piece right here. So this would be fun to do a lot of different cards and looks. These all would make great options for doing watercolor like this. So hopefully I gave you some ideas of ways to use your watercolor paper and spritzers and water painters. Lots of different things you can try and do. We had a lot of fun in class. But that is it for this. Like I said, if you want to place an order of $25 or more with that host code within the next 2 weeks, then I will send you a piece of the watercolor paper that you can cut down in order to make 3 cards like this. And I'll also get you all of the measurements for them. Lots going on right now with Stampin' Up! And the retiring list, which went live today with the sale prices. And then new catalog comes May 1st. So stay tuned for that. And be sure to check out my website, emkcreations.com, to check out all the blog posts. Thank you.